Ideas are like cloaks. They are invitations into new intellectual worlds, right? This insight came from a story written thousands of years ago, and I want to break down exactly how I uncovered it with my C sketch shape process, so you too can learn to extract compelling ideas from unlikely places. Starting with a single note, I'll show you how I followed unexpected connections, refined my thoughts, and using ChatGPT, all that kind of stuff, and turned it into something that I believe is worth sharing. Now, one thing to note, I'm using Mem as my note-taking app. They're currently working on version 2.0, and it is a complete redesign, so it's in the alpha stage as of this video. All right, let's dive in. Okay, we are looking at Mem, and we are looking at the idea that came as a result of this Bible story, right? Idea is titled Ideas as Cloaks, Invitations to New Intellectual Worlds. On the right-hand side, here we have Mem Chat, and I'll be going back and forth between this, and then this is what you're looking at here is Figma or FigJam to help me kind of document the process of what happened, and then we'll also be looking at ChatGPT as well. So, it all started with a conversation. Okay, so I opened up the Mem Chat with a prompt. Show me a note to explore further. All right, so you can see here on the 28th of January, show me a note to explore further. I was just looking for a random note. Didn't really care. I just was going to kind of roll with it. So it responded with a note from 1 Kings 19 through 21, or chapter 19, verses 19 through 21. And it gave me a list of things to consider, right? Connections to other stories, the symbolism of the cloak in the story, ordinary to extraordinary, reflections on seasons. And I wanted to point out, once you've developed the habit of capturing ideas, you always have more than enough to discover or uncover something new. So this idea that I can kind of just jump in and tell Mem to just show me a random note and let's just see where it goes, that's kind of cool. But in order to do that, you got to actually capture stuff. I'm sure that you have a bank of ideas that you could just go back through and open up. You don't have to have, a chat to do that for you. You can just open up a random one, right? And kind of just explore, see where it goes.
Hey, before I continue on, I wanted to let you know about my free note-making guide. The video that you're watching now is a result of me following this process and these methods. If you follow what's in this guide, you'll never have to worry about getting stuck creatively. You'll have a flowing river of unique ideas for the projects that you're working on. You'll discover sticky analogies that will spice up your ideas, and then you'll create a rhythm to slow down. How many of us need to slow down? I know I need to slow down. And you'll have a rhythm to think deeply more often. So if you're interested in any of that, click the link in the description below. All right, let's keep going.
I also wanted to point out, starting with a random note is a fun, almost game-like experience, right? You never will know what will pop up or where it might lead. So the note from the 1 Kings 19 appeared, followed by points to consider. And I kind of think of these here as paths to follow. And as I was reading through this response, I responded with, the idea of Elijah throwing the cloak on Elisha is interesting. It was an invitation into a new season. And I imagine God throwing cloaks on us. But what could that look like? And Mem is looking at my notes, right? It's looking at my notes and seeing things that I've written down related to these ideas that we're discussing in this chat right here. So I think of ideas as paths. There's a path to follow, right? An interesting way to start an intellectual journey. So I responded with my thoughts on what stood out and posed a question of how might God throw a cloak as a way to invite me into a new season. And MemChat responded with potential ways that, God might throw a cloak, right, metaphorically. As I scanned the response, the word inspiration stood out to me. So let's look at that real quick. You can see it's responding here, or did respond, and it gave me some things to consider: opportunities as cloaks, challenges, inspiration, and communities, or community and relationships. All of these are something I could have explored and could have gone down, and probably maybe will in the future. But in the moment that I was in this chat, inspiration and then a sudden idea or passion that ignites within us can be a cloak, urging us to pursue a path we hadn't considered before. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, wait a minute. That is true, right? Like, I don't know if you believe in God or not, but I believe God can drop something in my mind, in my heart, an idea, right? That I can just kind of follow. And it can act almost, if the idea is in some way like a way to shift my perspective or take me down a journey that would grow something in me. That's a cloak right there. And so I just responded with, it's kind of cool to think of an idea as a cloak. I didn't think of that before, right? An invitation to explore it further, an invitation to follow it, to see where it leads. And you can see here, like, there's not really a system here. I mean, other than this is the C phase, right? In the C sketch shape, I'm just looking and exploring what is standing out to me. And I don't know that I would have found the connection of cloak, an idea being a cloak, which is part of, what happened to Elisha when Elijah threw a cloak on him. That was a symbol for, like, there's more to come. There's, like, this season that you are in right now is about to end, and you're about to enter a new season. But I didn't think of ideas. So it was cool to see in chat here how that popped up, right? So I'm chatting with my notes, and these things are bubbling up that I wouldn't have thought of. All right, let's continue. An idea can be a cloak, an invitation into something deeper. And this was the path that I decided to follow. So I chatted back with my thoughts on ideas as cloaks. Let's look at that. That's what I just showed you guys. And then it started bringing up some new things. Before I get into that, though, I did want to say, like I mentioned before, Mem looks at your notes for connections. They like to describe it as a personal Google. And I think it's true. Like, what comes back as potential connections are all the things that deeply resonate with you, right? It's really incredible. And I've found it to be inspiring for me to see these connections, and some things I'm like, I wouldn't have thought of it like that. I wouldn't have thought of it like that. Or other things are like, I forgot about that quote. I forgot about that note, kind of thing. So Zettelkasten, I'm bringing this up kind of randomly here, but that's kind of like the Zettelkasten. I'm sure that when Nicholas Luhmann was going through his Zettelkasten, he had these little moments of, whoa, like, like there's this idea, and I've put it into my Zettelkasten, and now I am just seeing kind of how it's connecting with other things. And as I begin to just sit and look at these notes together, I'm seeing more connections that I wouldn't have considered before. That's kind of how I'm feeling in this moment, where I'm like, hey, there's these ideas that Mem is bubbling up for me, these notes that are connected to this idea of ideas being cloaks, invitations to new worlds, intellectual worlds. So the chat pulls up Alan Arnold. Rather than expecting our art or ideas to do things for us, we can view them as invitations for others to experience these ideas with us. I think it's cool because ideas should be experienced together, right? It's cool to have it be by yourself, but it's even more of an impact, I think, if ideas are experienced together and with other people. And then he brings up a note that I had taken from Jeremy Riddle, who is an artist and a musician, and and he brought and it brought that up there. I keep saying he. That's not he. So that's where I stopped in the chat. All right. So I then opened up a new note, which is the note that you're looking at on this left-hand side right here. Okay. And here we're looking at the sketch section right here. And I'm going to, on Fig Jam, I'm going to come over here. Opened up a new note and added the scripture from the First Kings note, because I wanted to reread this part of the scripture, and I also linked the scripture as well. This is the original note here. So this is the original note that the chat originally referenced. This is the First Kings note, and my thoughts and ideas as I was reading this scripture right here. And now I pulled the scripture back in here, and I referenced the note, or I linked the note, and then I started writing down some ideas, right? Rereading the scripture, the line, Elijah passed by and cast his cloak on him, caught my eye. This reminded me of an idea that I had encountered in Alan Arnold's newsletter, talking about Ruth Stone and the poet Ruth Stone, and how she described while working in the fields. I've actually talked about this on another video. But poems would come to her like a thunderous train of air barreling down across the landscape. And if she didn't stop everything to write those down, those words would go looking for another poet. And I wanted to communicate to you, part of sketching an idea involves grabbing hold of those immediate connections. Right? Sometimes the connection is buried in another note. And when that happens, you just write down what your connection is and then connect the note it's already inside of. The title may not be related, but the story within is. So in that case, that's what happened, right? It reminds me of a lot like the Ruth Stone, about Ruth Stone. And I just kind of wrote it down. And the title of the note that particular Ruth Stone moment is in, or the story is in, is titled 3 Ways to Deepen Your Note-Taking Experience. So I couldn't just link the note and not give it context, right? This is the context of why I linked this note right here. So I said the cloak here is a big deal. It's a symbol of a new adventure. Is it possible that some ideas are like cloaks being passed on us and trusted to us to care for and turn into something more? Right? So that was the idea. And then I delved deeper into the connections from the chat and started writing about those. I wrote the quote down that the chat had referenced, and then I put a bullet underneath and started writing. So what that looks like is, this is the quote from Alan Arnold: rather than expect your art to do things for you, let it be an invitation for others to experience ideas with you. Right? So then I wrote down my notes in a bullet point beneath that, or a sub bullet point. I did the same thing again with the Jeremy Riddle quote. And then I kept reading through the scripture again, and I noticed that it was just an ordinary day for, actually it was Elisha. Ordinary days and moments are always simmering with ideas. And so he showed up like every other day. He was out in the fields plowing, and he was in the space where a cloak could be thrown upon him, right? He was ready to receive, if that makes sense. So I wanted to communicate to you, revisit the quote or idea that you're writing about multiple times, right? I reread that part of the scripture multiple times, and each time you may find something new, which happened to me. This was one of those things that stood out, and then this was another one that stood out. But it didn't happen through one reading. I read through it, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I wrote about it. And then and this is actually how the bullet points are in order of how these things kind of played out in my mind, and how it just kind of unfolded for me, these ideas, right? Okay. So we have the C phase, which we talked about, was the conversation in chat. And then the sketch phase was all about pulling out the things that happened in chat and also the connections that I saw and writing about them. And I even label this section sketch. And it's just the referenced story so that I could just easily go in. I don't want to have to click this note. I can open it over here if I want to. Could totally do that, but I just have it right up here so I can reference and then go back and forth easily. And now we're in what I call the shape phase, right? And this is kind of in the design world. This is what I call the wireframe. Wireframes are not visually appealing. It's usually kind of just hand drawn, or it doesn't have any color. It's just to give you the idea of like the structure of a flow of a task on a website or something like that. It can be a lot of different things. But in this case, my wireframing is to shape the ideas in the sketch into something that's a little bit more cohesive and in a flow. One quick thought: I've been experimenting with this flow the last month or so, and it seems to work well. During the sketching phase, I can truly just kind of spill my guts on the page, which is what you saw here on the sketch section right here. And then I don't have to worry about, editing or anything like that. It's just kind of me just, like I said, spilling my guts on the page. Which helps me find ideas and write about ideas that I wouldn't have thought of or discovered, because my mind's not in a different phase when it's like being in two different seasons at once. You can't do it when you're trying to edit and also just kind of write. Hope that makes sense. So let's look at ChatGPT. So here I have a main idea and some supporting thoughts that I need help structuring. And then, here's the main idea. And then here's everything from the sketch section. And so it spit back some flow and some structure for me and kind of clean things up. So I placed that structure, the one you just saw in ChatGPT, back into my note in Mem, right above the sketch section. And so this keeps everything in one note for me, and I can kind of see the progression of the idea. Right, it starts out with this sketch right here, and then it moves on to this wireframe, and then finally a prototype, which is like a more polished version of the idea. And the wireframe and the prototype kind of look the same, like just scanning back and forth like this. But there are some differences, and because then the prototype, I'm actually going in and figuring out, okay, does this sound like me? Does it flow well? Do the ideas make sense? Do the transitions make sense when I'm going from one idea to the next, or supporting ideas, to support the main idea? Does it all flow together? So, it's a little bit different. And so I was going through this in the Mem note, right? And just reading through it. And actually reading the words aloud, it helps me a lot to see if it fits my voice. If I have trouble reading something, it could be because it's phrased weird, but it also because it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't really sound like me. I wouldn't say it that way, or I don't use those words, and and I'm not against using words that are different or maybe unique if it fits. But if it doesn't sound like me, then it's not going to sound authentic. So I'm trying actually reading the words out loud. And I didn't have an intro, so I quickly jotted down one and asked GPT to refine it. And this whole process is cyclical. It's refining, revising, and reworking until it feels right. Right? So and here I added an intro here. This is what I put in it. And we were going back and forth, as you can see here, to try and get it right. Because GPT, the first version of GPT is not the right version. I don't want that to be something that I just like say, okay, it's good enough. I want to try and actually go through and say, okay, this may be a good start. That's kind of like a good thing for me, actually, is say this is a good start. But let me bring it back into my notes app, away from GPT, and let me kind of rework it. Let me read it aloud and see where there's missing pieces, or see where that doesn't make sense, or see where there's words or that are like just not me sounding. So there you go. There you have it. There's a quick note here. While in the shape phase, I did hop over to the Copilot, which is Mem's related notes feature, and found two other connections I wanted to think about as it relates to ideas. So let's take a look at Copilot. So there's chat, which is on the right hand side, but you can toggle between chat and Copilot. Copilot is, as you can see, it's kind of just bubbling up ideas right now. But when you are inside of a note, it will show you notes that it could be related to the note, right? So while I was in this note, I jumped over to Copilot and I saw two other ideas that I wanted to include. And this, I think this is probably my favorite feature in Mem. I constantly find notes that I wouldn't have considered related. It's like I'm painting a picture with 5 colors, right? And these are the colors that I know. This is what I always use, 5 colors. And then Mem comes along and shows me new palettes and new colors and new ways to combine the colors that I can include in the painting to make it come even more alive. And it is my favorite thing about this note-taking app, which is Copilot right here. You may be asking, why didn't I use chat to refine the ideas? And to be honest, I have tried before, and I don't think it's quite there yet. And again, this is an alpha stage, but I don't think it's quite there yet to do what ChatGPT does. And I don't even know how they use it. They probably use ChatGPT in this, but it's just it seems like it works a little bit smoother and it's a little bit faster in ChatGPT. And so while I'm in the mode of writing and trying to figure things out and just working through things, I don't really want to be bogged down by a chat that's not really responsive or doesn't really know what I'm talking about. So it's a work in progress. I do love the chat feature for, being able to explore. That's really valuable, actually. And that you can't find that in GPT because GPT doesn't have access to all the notes that I have in Mem. All right, so I hope this was helpful for you, and I hope that this kind of sparks some ideas, even if you don't use Mem, on how maybe you can use this process of see, sketch, and shape, and also maybe ways to combine ideas and all of that. So if there's anything that stands out to you that you want to learn more about, or that you just thought was maybe something you want to try, let me know in the comments below. Or if you have things that work out for you, that work great for you, let me know. I'm all ears. I love to hear about other people's processes as well. Keep thinking deep and wide, my friend, and I'll see you on the next video.